Everyone, welcome to EDU Endpoint Office Hours. Today is October the 10th. It's October. This is exciting. Fall sweater weather has arrived, and we've got some good updates to share with you all. So it's just an open Q&A day today, so we've gone ahead and recorded that. Hopefully we'll get some good discussion, but I'll turn it over to Richard, and we can go from there.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Garrett. So for yesterday's release of ConfigMgr 2309, we decided that we'd just kind of break it down a little bit more than we've done in the past. I think we've been pretty Intune heavy for most of these calls. I know a lot of you are still using ConfigMgr, so we felt today was probably a pretty good time to kind of dig in a little deeper to what this new release has. So with 2309, this is actually going to be a baseline release. So the baseline releases for ConfigMgr are generally those that you can just install directly from media without having to directly upgrade. So some releases you might find that, hey, I'm installing a new ConfigMgr site, but I've got to install some really old version first, and then I have to in-place upgrade to the latest version. With this release, it's going to be a baseline release version. So you'll be able to just download the media for 2309 once it goes GA. But it was released yesterday into the early update ring. And so what I've included here in the slide is a link directly to the what's new, but also a link directly to the early update ring PowerShell script that you need to run in order to enable it. So if you've got a lab or something that you want to turn it on with, you can go ahead and do that by opting into the early update ring. Now, one thing that's important about this release that's different from the past is that there is a requirement for the SQL ODBC 18 driver. And we haven't had to install these very often with past releases of ConfigMgr, but with this release you do. If you don't do it, you will get a failure during your prerequisite check. So the link to it is directly here in the slide. It's also linked in, actually, I don't think it's linked directly in the docs. I think I had to grab this from the prerequisite checker when it failed. It gives you the link and you can go directly grab it and install it. So this link is the direct download for it. And then once you install the ODBC driver, ConfigMgr is not going to update it. So in future releases like 2403, when that comes out, it won't update the ODBC driver. So if there's a driver update available at that time, it's going to be up to you to update it. So if there's any security vulnerabilities or anything that are found, you'll need to go ahead and handle those. All right, so let's get into some of the features that were actually, these are all the features, and I've included direct links to each of the features. So if there's something that looks interesting to you that you want to directly go to, this is all just basically from the What's New page. So you can just click on any of these links and scroll up and down, and you'll get to whatever thing you're interested in. But the first thing that we added was scheduled run scripts. So if you use run scripts in ConfigMgr and deploying PowerShell scripts directly to your clients or your collections, you can now schedule those, which you couldn't do in the past. So that's a huge thing that a lot of people have been asking for. We also added external service notification for run details from Azure Logic applications. And if you don't do this, I wouldn't be surprised if very many people actually use Azure Logic apps within ConfigMgr. But you can use that if you wanted to send notifications from like a status filter or a status message, and you want to send that to some external service, like maybe ServiceNow or some other third-party solution. You can use Azure Logic apps to broker that connectivity between ConfigMgr and whatever that third party is. And so we've just got some new notification run details that have been added to that functionality. We also added a new site maintenance task that says delete age task execution status messages. So that's there now. We've also added the native Windows Update reboot experience with Windows 11 22H2 or later. So when update notifications come to a device with ConfigMgr, as you guys that use it have probably known for a long time, is that it uses the Software Center pop-up bubbles in the bottom right. And so that's a lot different than what Windows 11 has for its update notification when you just use the native Windows 11 updates. And so what we're doing now is we're actually migrating that Software Center experience over to leveraging native Windows Update reboot experience now. So the notifications and the reboot experience should basically look native to the OS, regardless of whether Config Manager or Windows Update for Business or just native Windows Update is updating the machine. We also added the ability for you to specify which management point your client can select for PXE booting. This is something that in the past, what we've had to do is you've basically changed the timeout delay for each of the management points or the PXE service points. Now you don't have to do that. You can actually pick out of a dropdown which preferred MP you want your clients to go to select for which that they actually want to PXE boot from.
You know, I needed that feature for like probably 4 years ago. I needed that feature.
I think we've needed it ever since like SCCM 2007.
So
like, I mean, it's something that we've needed for a long time now. So it's finally there. Enabling BitLocker through Provision TS. So if you don't know what Provision TS is it's a command line switch when you install the client to tell the client which task sequence to run after the client installs. And so you might think, well, if I'm doing OSD, why do I care about this? Because if I'm imaging with OSD, I'm using a task sequence, and in that task sequence, I'm actually running the task sequence and the steps that I want the client to go through. What this is really used for, though, is in situations like autopilot, where you want to in-tune and roll the device, but you also want that machine to be co-managed. And so if that machine is going to be co-managed, there might be things on the SCCM side of things where you want those things to install in a specific order. So you may want your machines to run a task sequence after the device autopilot enrolls, and it's going to install, app 1, 2, 3, 4. It might run a script. It might do a number of things. And so with Provision TS, that gives you that capability of, we're native in the cloud, but we still have some things in Config Manager that we still want to run. And so what we've done now is we've actually enabled BitLocker support through Provision TS now. So if this was something that was blocking you from leveraging this, you now have that capability. And then actually it's not last, there's a couple more things here. So on this slide, at least, support for Windows 11 edition upgrades. Not sure how many of you guys are probably doing this. I suspect it's probably fairly low, but there is support now for doing SKU upgrades from like Windows 11 Pro to Windows 11 Enterprise or Education. There's also a new Windows 11 upgrade readiness dashboard that we've added. So you can go click into that. Keep in mind that we're just about 2 years now out from Windows 10 support going away. So keep that in mind. And then we also added some enhanced cloud management gateway security. I'm not entirely sure exactly what we're doing here, but what it does require you to do is that if you're using a cloud management gateway today, you will need to go into your Config Manager console, select Azure Active Directory tenants, select your tenant, and then select your server app, and click on Update Application Settings. I don't know what happens if you don't do this. I don't know if the CMG is actually going to be broken or not. It's not entirely clear in the release notes, but this is something that we mentioned not only just in the 2309 release notes, but even in the CMG documentation, we outlined that you need to do this. So if you're going through the 2309 upgrade, make sure to do this. Otherwise, your CMG may not work. Not entirely sure what exactly happens if you don't do it. We've also added some support for creating the CMG web server app via PowerShell. There's a new commandlet for that. We've added some attack surface reduction rule compliance markings. So in the past, if you had an ASR rule within Config Manager for servers, we would mark the device as compliant immediately instead of after enforcement. So now it's not going to be marked as compliant if you have servers that you're doing this with. They won't be marked as compliant until the compliance policy or the ASR rule has been enforced on the machine. And then lastly, the last two things here, there's one known issue with bulk registration tokens. And so if you're using bulk registration tokens, I'm not sure how many of you guys are doing this. It's not super common, although I know that there's a few of you out there that are. There are errors that that happen post upgrade to 2309. You'll get an error message when you're trying to generate the token. That's supposed to be fixed, or there's a fix that's planned for it. Keep in mind this is early. You're opting in early if you're trying to use this today. So if 2309 is or if bulk registration tokens are something that you use, then upgrading to 2309 is something you're not going to want to do right now. And then lastly, deprecation notice. We've documented this in the past, so this shouldn't be new. But resource access features. So there's a node in the ConfigMgr console under assets and compliance that will show all of your resource access policies. So things like Wi-Fi profiles, VPN profiles, stuff like that. Those features are actually going away. And they will be gone in 2403, which is the next release of ConfigMgr. If you still have those features, you need to move those over to Intune or co-management. If you haven't started doing that, you should do that now before 2403 releases. If you don't do it, it will block the upgrade to 2403. You'll get a prerequisite notification in the console if you try to upgrade to 2403. So make sure that you do that. Okay, now in September, we made a release. We made an updated release of the Windows 11 ADK for 22H2. This isn't the 23H2 ADK, although it's built off of the 23H2 ADK, which is going to come out. It's not the 23H2 ADK. And I want to make that clear because there's been a lot of questions and confusion about this ADK on Twitter and Reddit and a bunch of other places. And so if you click into, you can click on all these links, by the way, because it's using PowerPoint Live. So all this stuff is available to you to click through. If you click on that link for the Windows 11 ADK, it's going to take you directly to where to download it. There's a link in there on that page that'll tell you what's new, and a lot of the what's new stuff is going to be around, I think, ARM64 support. There's some stuff with the Performance Toolkit, but nothing really calls out Windows PE. But this update is actually really important because back in May, there was a KB article that was released for Windows Client around a secure boot vulnerability, CVE 2023-24932, as it's linked here. That KB has some pretty significant instructions on how to mitigate the secure boot vulnerability that went out at the time. And there's a ton of confusion at the time about what this update meant. That this update is something that, while the fixes for this CVE they're in the patch itself, there were some things that you as a customer had to do in order to implement those fixes. And if you didn't implement the fixes, then you didn't have to worry about anything. Like, you're still vulnerable to the problem because you didn't actually implement the additional work that you had to do in order to turn on the fixes, but the code was actually there. And so for customers that had enabled these fixes, though, that had installed the KB, but then also turned on the additional fixes that they needed to turn on, what they also needed to do was update any boot media. So if you were using ConfigMgr, for instance, you implemented these fixes and the KB, or you had updated media that you were deploying, you also needed to update your boot media. But most people don't update their boot media. They don't slipstream in KB articles or anything like that. They just use the boot media that comes with the ADK. And so at the time of this release, a lot of customers were asking us, when are you going to release an updated version of the ADK that has these security fixes built into the ADK? And we didn't have an answer at the time. Well, we do now, and it was the September revision. Those fixes are actually in it. Now, you don't have to install this ADK. There's no requirement to deploy this ADK. If things are working for you and you don't care about the CVE fix and all that, that's fine. You don't have to do any of that. But if you do want to make sure that you're that you're completely secure from this whole thing, then you will need to update the ADK to make your life a little bit easier, so you don't have to just go manage slipstreaming security updates into your boot media. So this ADK fixes that problem. However, it creates a new problem, and that's VB script support. VB script support is missing from the ADK, and this is causing some pretty major issues with those that are using MDT specifically, because everything in MDT uses VB script. However, ConfigMgr is not really implicated unless you're using VB script in Windows PE. Now, this sort of foreshadows something that's coming soon, and that's VB script support all up is being deprecated in Windows. We are moving it to a feature on demand. And so because of this, we don't have the feature on demand available just yet because 23H2 is not out. And so what the community has done is, and this is from Johan Arwemark, if you don't know him, he's an MVP that's been doing OSD for as long as I can remember. And he has a blog post that explains the situation fairly well, and how to fix VB script support if you're using the Windows ADK for September 2023. So you can click on that link, and that'll give you more information about how you can work around this for now. We will be issuing an updated version of the ADK that I suspect is going to have VB script support. And so we're aware of the problem. It's just that we don't have an immediate fix right now. And so this is what the community is doing right now to solve for that. And with that, I'll kick it over to Scott, and he'll talk about the Intune updates. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Richard. I'm actually going to share out my screen because I'm going to show you each of the different updates, I think, inside of Intune. I don't know if many of you have been able to see all of them yet, but this is some of the new stuff from 2309 specifically. So let me go ahead and share out my desktop. Can you guys see it? Thumbs up.
Yeah, we got you, Scott.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk about the first one here. Let me get back to move this out of the way. Okay, so first off is remote help, and for Mac OS. So this came out as a view-only option. So I have an older version here of Mac OS that I am using. It's very hard for me to actually show this, but anyway, this is a view-only mode of Mac OS, and it works very similar to other Mac OS devices. One of the things that you will need to consider, and I found this out just messing around with it, this if your device is unenrolled, obviously you won't be able to use that because that's a setting you need to set in remote help. So if you plan on using this for unenrolled devices, make sure you set your remote help to allow for unenrolled support. You don't need to change anything in here from corporate or personal. That's nothing you need to do, but just wanted to bring that out. Coming in here to this MacBook Air, it'll come over here, and what you'll notice over here is there is a new action that you have here on all of your actions for your Mac OS devices. And so you'll have the name of your device that you're connecting to. And then what you can do here is then at that point, you can either have the user go out to aka.ms RHH, and you can end the passcode, or if you need to, you can send them the session link and then go ahead and start the remote session. So what'll end up happening is this remote session starts and it'll start to connect. So let me see if I can actually see if I can get it to connect. You either need to have, you can have Edge, Chrome, or Safari installed on the device. And again, this is the first iteration of this. This is, let's see, let me see if that will connect in. not what I want. Let's see. Yeah, I've been having some issues with this. So again, this is all in preview. This is all new. So if it's not working correctly, I don't know why. But anyway, I just fired this up this afternoon. But anyway, be aware that this is only a view only mode. So it's only going to give you, there's only so much you're going to be able to do with this at this point. Obviously, this is still included in your remote help license. So you're not having to pay any additional costs for this. And you can, and we will be adding more features to that. Android has gone, remote help for Android has also gone general availability. So if you're managing Android devices in Intune, that feature is available as well. One of the other things that came out was a new feature to look at when the management certificate expiration date. This was actually a field. So if you want to go and enable this in your tenant, all you need to do is just come over here to columns. And then, of course, you want to check for management expiration certificate expiration date. I just brought up a new tenant, so that's why all my management expirations are, this information is pretty current. But again, why is this important? Because you want to be able, if you have devices that you have taken in, maybe you've purchased new devices over the spring and the summer, you take those devices, you get them intra joined, get them enrolled into Intune. Maybe they just sit on the shelf for a year and you haven't done anything with it. So let's say you get into a situation where you have to take this device out, hand it to a user or a student, and then you come to find that you can't manage this device. So you can use this to, when you are doing a view, to do some sorting, to at least in some way be able to find when those devices are getting close to the expiration. So take advantage of that. Now, one of the other features that this is one that is now an insider preview. This is the config refresh feature. And this is important here, especially if you want to ensure that your devices, if you push a setting down through Intune through the settings catalog, that the device management, if that is changed, or it's not a lock per se, but you can have Intune actually go back and force that change back. So you can actually do a cadence refresh right now. So I found this kind of interesting. If you flip it on, configure refresh is disabled. If you have it to the left, it's enabled. I would have thought it would have been the other way, but just be aware of that. And config, you can set the cadence interval. Let's see, I think you could set it to 30 if you wanted. So if you wanted to take that down to every 30 minutes, the default is 90. So I would leave it at that. I don't know what the high end of that number, I haven't tested that out. But that is available here in the settings catalog. Just type in config refresh in your settings picker, and you can enable that setting. One of the other pieces that we have now added is some mobile application management for Windows. And I would actually, I've linked to it in the deck, and I would actually encourage all of you to go take a look at this. But you can actually manage Microsoft Edge policies, say from a device that might be unmanaged, and then maybe that they're connecting to your organization through their personal computer. Specifically, let's say they have a Windows home machine that they have at home, and they use Microsoft Edge, and you want to have some mobile application management policies on that device. So you can come over here to your app protection policies and click on Windows. So let's say we want to do man for Windows. And then we'll click next here, and then we'll select Microsoft Edge as the browser, because that is the application. So here you can come in here and you can set all of your DLP controls. It's like your copy, cut, paste restrictions. So you can set all sources. You can set your destinations. You can allow cut, copy, and paste, and you can also block or print any of your print org data. This allows you to set your health conditions on this screen. So, for example, maybe you want to have a minimum OS level. So in that particular case, if you do know that, for example, in this particular field, if you want to set that to the most recent version of Windows 11, so that would be obviously either 21H2 or excuse me, 22H2 with the October security update that's out today. You could do that, and then of course you could, if depending on the device access, you could then either block access, wipe the device, wipe data from that device if they're not meeting that certain level of requirements. I would actually go encourage, let me grab this link here real quick, because there's actually some really good information about this. If you go in here, so these are the policies that you can actually configure. So if you come down here, you'll see that you can, there is the Intune app protection policies. So you can obviously do the health checks, but then there are other things that you can configure in here, such as Windows Security Center. So you can do that as well. And then of course, you can also set up conditional access. So if you want to ensure that your data is protected and that the PC and the user meets a certain level of requirements before using their home PC to connect to their data, you can set the conditional access up there as well. So this is just another way that you can extend using Intune to ensure that your device, devices that you don't manage or that connect to your data, you can actually protect the data and you're not having to worry about that data leakage getting out. So Richard, Garrett, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
All right, thanks, Scott. Let's see here. We got lots of questions in the chat. Let's go through here.
Yeah, so there are, can we go back to the VB script removal question? I think Jose's question is a good one on, if I can find it now. Oh, I saw it. Oh, it's gone. I think it was just asking, like, are we going to have a formal announcement when it, can we expect further support with it? Is it being deprecated altogether? Will it just be a feature add-on? Do we have any more context around kind of the future of VB script support in Windows?
Yeah, it's being deprecated. It's actually documented too. So let me grab the doc for that.
Yeah. Okay. I think maybe Jose, you must have deleted that because you found that. Yeah, there it is. Cool. The other one that I think we need to get an update on is connected cache. I believe it's still in preview. And I don't think we have a GA date for enterprise or education customers.
Right. There's no, I haven't really heard anything on connected cache in a really long time. I know it still works. I've got it working in my environment. So I haven't heard any plans getting rid of it or doing anything else. So it could be that maybe there's something at Ignite that they announced. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing at this point. But yeah, haven't heard much about getting it out of preview and into GA.
Yeah, and actually, I think Amy chatted with us. She was the one who presented, and she's no longer with Microsoft. So she went actually to an education startup focusing on computer science education for K-12. So pretty cool.
Very cool.
So yeah, we'll have to find out a little bit more about that. And then Keith had a couple of good questions. Number one, I think started piloting with config refresh. When is GA targeted? I would suspect around Ignite, but I don't know that we have a formal announcement around that. It may be in preview for a while. I don't know that we have a GA target date yet.
There's nothing that we've announced for when config refresh is going to be available. The thing that we did announce back when we made the September moment announcement 2 weeks ago was that it would be a couple months before config refresh comes out. So if you do the math on that, should be sometime in November, would be my guess, but things can change. At the time, we didn't have the config refresh stuff lit up in Intune like Scott showed today. It's actually there. It wasn't there 2 weeks ago. So they're still rolling stuff out. And so I suspect November is probably when it's due.
Another one is, are there any improvements for clientless VPN configuration? All the additional backend infrastructure to make it work with Intune just wasn't worth it. Hoping there's some streamlining happening here soon.
Not that I'm aware of.
I haven't heard of anything. And then lastly, how granularly can Bing Chat AI be managed with Intune? Not that granular. So remember that Bing Chat is a service in Bing, right? And Windows Copilot, or actually we should say Copilot in Windows, is just leveraging Bing Chat and Bing Chat Enterprise. So we have some basic configurations that will be released. I think there's still custom OMA URIs that you could target right now to disable Copilot in Windows. And we have some settings that we can control, like safe search, but there's not a lot of granular control with Bing Chat itself with Intune.
Yeah. Yeah, and and right now there's just a single user policy to turn off Copilot in Windows. So there's really not a lot of AI controls just yet in the OS. Who knows if that changes over time, but right now, not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. And then Mike's question is, how do we force the device to update the management expiration certificate if it's going to expire soon?
I thought there was a script for that. Let me look into that. I think there's a script for it, but the client should do it on its own when it checks into Intune.
I was thinking it was automatic.
The client certificate stuff is usually automatic. You don't really need to worry about this too much. However, education's probably the industry that's the most impacted by this because of the need to have a bunch of devices typically on standby. And a lot of devices might be like in classrooms, and the person that's going to grab them to use them might just be like a teacher or someone that's not really in IT. And so if they're like in a closet or somewhere that someone just grabs a device and tries to replace like a student's broken device, if that device has been sitting in the closet for a year, well, the certificate's most likely going to be expired. So it's one of the reasons we don't recommend having devices just sit for a while, because those certs expire, but obviously your software is out of date, and the person that turns that device on next probably not gonna have a great experience because they've got to update all the software. So there's that. The device might not even be in management. So you're probably just best to reimage that device if that's the case. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a script to do this. I'll have to double check if you really wanted to kick it off yourself. But the best piece of advice really would be just to turn the devices on and make sure that they check in before those certs expire, as opposed to trying to renew certs on your own.
Yeah, and to your point, I think Mark had that question too, is what happens if the certificate expires? How do we get the devices managed again without having to wipe and re-enroll? I don't think there's a way to do it unless that script can do it.
No, what you would need to do in that situation is you'd have to remove it from Azure AD and then if it's Azure AD joined device, then you would remove it from Azure AD, re-add it. If it's a hybrid joined device, you could do a dsreg cmd /leave, and then you can do a dsreg cmd /join.
That's a good point.
And that should get you back in without having to reimage a hybrid joined device. So you've got some options there, but they're both very manual, not super easy to remote or automate that remotely.
Tyler's got a question on what is happening with WDAC and the changes with Windows 11. I also see things referred to as Smart App Control. I think it's just being rebranded, isn't it?
Yeah, the security stuff tends to get rebranded every couple of years or so. They call things by a new name, but it's really all kind of the same stuff. But WDAC's not necessarily going away. I want to say on the smart app control stuff, I don't know if that's consumer or not, but pretty sure that's that we added that more as like a consumer feature, whereas for something like WDAC, that would obviously be more enterprise focused.
Yeah, I was in the September moment logs, I believe, that they hinted at it, but I just took it as a rebrand.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a separation between consumer and commercial. Okay, one last one that I think is in the chat. Was the very first one was, and I just want to get Richard's reaction to this. Does anyone know why Microsoft doesn't include the company portal baked in to education and enterprise versions of Windows?
Yeah.
Or
why
is it not installed automatically when the device is enrolled into Intune? Similar question.
Yeah, we tried to get engineering to opt into doing this, especially when we were making the change from the store for business to the new store app type. And we just basically just said, like, if the device is going to enroll into Intune, why not just deploy the company portal instead of having customers do it? Because we put other things in the operating system that people don't want. This is something that people actually do want. And so we may as well put what they want into there and not, have them have to jump through hoops and do that. So, so I don't have an answer for it as to why we're not doing it. We definitely see the need for it, and I think the majority of us would gladly have it there to reduce the time it takes to deploy. Because as I think Mike had mentioned in his comment, sometimes it feels like it takes like hours for the application to install because you have to wait for the Intune management extension to install. Once that's installed, then that has to go and grab policy and sync and figure out, okay, what are the Win32 apps that I need to install, plus what other things are being deployed. Because not only is it doing app installs, but then there's also scripts and other things that you might be deploying that the Intune management extension is responsible for dealing with. So there's a lot that by itself is doing. Plus, on top of that, now you're waiting for the company portal app, which if that's the only app you're deploying, which in some cases that is the case, especially if you're having a custom image that has all of your other stuff in it, and you only need the company portal, it can feel like it's a waste of time. So, yeah, so Mike, so I totally agree. I think we should put it in there, but it's not for lack of trying. But we'll keep pushing on it, and so hopefully we'll see it someday.
Yeah, I think Tyler has a great point that in some cases, some customers may not want that company portal out there, but I kind of think it'd be nice to have that as default experience and then turn it off if you wish to not have it.
There's over a dozen apps that people don't want in enterprise and education SKUs that are there. So
and they're still there.
And they're still there.
I have something functional.
and we've asked for them to be removed for the last 8 years since Windows 10. So, I mean, yeah, it's above our pay grades to turn it all
is. But we take your feedback. That's part of our job, is to follow that up. So keep it coming. Awesome. Let's see. There's a few other questions, and then I want to be sure to get to a few of the questions that were in the community channels question. But let's see. Why is winget/desktop app installer not by now also included in the Windows ISOs?
I don't know. Not sure whether
maybe it will be when 23H2 comes out in Windows 11. I don't know.
It's possible. I haven't looked at what they're doing. I mean, it's more of an open source kind of project. So I'm not sure exactly why they don't put it in yet, but like Garrett said, it could be 23H2 where it comes, at least in that media. I honestly don't know.
Yep, haven't seen it. Let's see. Timothy has a question. What is the best way to handle non-pro versions of Windows? I tried a script to detect the version, and then use a Mac key to upgrade from home at Ubi before uploading a hash, but it didn't work.
This is hilarious.
Also, we just got about 800 Windows 11 SE devices, but we don't use SE in our text, imaged about 100 before I noticed.
Okay, so the SE question is that's completely separate.
Two separate, yeah.
But so while I was kind of laughing at that autopilot question, was a while back I recorded a video about how to switch out of home to pro or education or enterprise. I didn't publish it to YouTube at the time. I forget who I think I recorded this for a specific customer and I just sent it over to them. But I published it last week for another customer that had the same question. So I'm going to post a link to it here. Actually, it's wrong link. Give me one sec. Here it is. Copy that. So it's about, I don't know, 12 minutes. You can fast forward me or play it at 1.5 times speed. And so it goes over how to do this, and just the too long didn't watch version is you can use a provisioning package to run changepk.exe, and then you'll pass, there's a product key parameter and you'll pass the product key. And so what this will do is it'll move it from home to whatever SKU you want. And I would just say, if you're education, go home to education. You go home to enterprise. Don't go home to pro and then go from pro to something else. It's just a waste of time to do that. But you can do it through a provisioning package. The problem, though, that I see with this approach is that when a device ships with home, it's typically a consumer device from your OEM. And if it's a consumer device, then it's probably going to have like third-party antivirus. It's probably going to have a bunch of other third-party apps that you don't want. And so while you can shift it from home to whatever SKU, you still might have all of that, what they call value-added software from the OEM. You might have that there still. And so now you have to determine if you're okay with having all that other software on the device, or if you want to try to clean it up using like scripts and other stuff. But I mean, if you're going to go that route, you may just be better off reimaging the device to something else. So that's the only gotcha that I think you would have if you're okay with that, with having the value-added software from the OEM on the device, which I know a lot of customers do it just because it's easier. They don't want to take the time to reimage all their devices. If that's the case, then you can use a provisioning package, and in that video I show you how to do it, how to make the package and all that. You can use that, and it will do the upgrade during the out-of-box experience. And then what I also show in that video is how the device will reboot after it does the upgrade, but then it also will start going through autopilot. So you'll get the autopilot flow after you do that SKU change. So the easiest thing to do is put it on a provisioning package, which will then go on a USB stick, and then you just plug the USB stick into the device as soon as you turn it on, and then it'll consume the package, upgrade it to Education Edition or Enterprise Edition, and then it will just reboot and then go through autopilot if you've registered the device to autopilot. If you haven't done that, then you could just use a bulk enrollment token within your provisioning package, and it'll automatically get it into Azure AD if you want to do that. So watch the video if you're interested. Like I said, it's about 12 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so now I think there's a little bit of discussion going on around this, and then post activation, you might need a KMS or a MAC key to get Windows to activate. But I
Yeah.
want to transition over. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you want to comment?
Oh, I was just going to say that, yeah, so you won't be able to use subscription activation, and I mentioned that in the video. You won't be able to use
Yep.
subscription activation. So
Yep.
you'll need a MAC or a KMS key. And I also mentioned in the video with KMS that you can pass the GVLK, and that will activate it as long as it can connect to your KMS server on-prem, then it'll activate like it should. So yes, MAC or KMS.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to throw a link in the chat here, and this is a question from Eric, who is wondering about computer names and how other districts are solving this. And it can be any organization really, but basically they're looking to move from on-prem to cloud, and trying to go as much inside of Intune as possible, right? And so with that, you want to provision these devices with autopilot, and you got to specify a name. And even when it comes to management with Intune, thinking about naming conventions. So in the past with imaging, we've had a lot of custom solutions out there. MDT had support because it had a database on the back end where you could query things on the device, things like serial number or other components that you could add to the database and make them custom. You could add asset tags, you could add like building locations, things like that. Anyway, it got really custom, and a lot of districts would name their computers a very specific name, right? And it might be something as simple as a room number and a serial number, or a building number and an asset tag, or some even have naming conventions where you have like an L for laptop or D for desktop or whatever. Even staff or student or faculty and student, however those complex naming schemes are. But with autopilot, we don't have those same capabilities, right? We just have the variables that are supported, which are serial and random. And so Eric's question is that he's now gone through two districts where naming conventions have been pretty static, actually dynamic, I should say. But it's these naming conventions have existed. They've built their business processes around these naming conventions. Everyone knows that when you read the computer name, you know exactly what machine that is, where it's at. And he's just looking for some tips on trying to move away from that and how he can manage devices a little bit better if you have a more generic name, and even if that works for like licensed software and things like that. So I wanted to post this question out really to everyone to get your experiences with this, because I feel like, Richard, you and I, we tend to have this question come up a lot, and we kind of have our own viewpoints on it. But I wanted to kind of pose this question and see if anyone's willing to kind of share how they've addressed computer names when moving to full modern management. And Richard, if you want to comment anything that I missed there.
No, I'll let folks come off mute if they want, or type something in the chat and tell us how you guys are handling it, and then I'll kind of give my take on it.
So I'm going to come off mute if that's okay. It's Matt from Rutherford.
Hey, Matt.
And so we have 50 sites in Intune that all the student devices are in Intune. And you got a couple of ways that we've tackled that. One, we're still a district that uses provisioning packages with student devices. So that provisioning package has become school site code - serial number. So I at least, overall, I can always say, oh, it's this school with this serial number. So at least helps a little bit. So it's automatic. There's no additional scripting involved. The tech knows that when they load the OS, the package is on the USB, and it's just done nice, simple. It's fairly basic, because we're also a district that, yeah, it used to be like room plus site code plus, is a desktop, laptop, all of that. And we've been successful over the last 4 years. There's not been a lot of struggle about like, oh, this machine or where to find it. It was, the thought of doing it was harder to let go than just actually having it. The second and more modern of what we're doing is we are continuing to migrate and move to full autopilot as we've made the shift to leveraging group tags. So we're using the group tag for specifically like, oh, is this a STEM class? You know, it gets a STEM, you know, maybe that tag says like STEM-middle, or that might say high school students or middle school students. You know, it's how granular you want to get. You've got that purchase order coming in from your vendor. So then you can use the purchase order for like a larger deployment, but when you need to tighten it up for, okay, these specific apps are going to this specific style of event or school, that's where we migrated and use group tags.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Matt. I'm gonna jump to Laura. Laura, do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, no, I would agree with Matt. Just because we were in that same boat. More so, we're concerned about the building, not necessarily the room locations. But and we, that was something that we had considered just doing our 3-letter code, which is our building code dash serial number, and that's hard. It's a hard thing to get, to switch over versus using what you've been using for 20 some years, and just that whole mind shift. But I think that's just a whole mind shift as a whole, moving to cloud-based management is, it just falls into line with that. But I was, also would confirm or concur with Matt about the group tags and building dynamic groups based upon those group tags. When we buy devices, we're not buying them necessarily for a specific site. When we're doing a replacement, we're doing a replacement for all the sites. And so separating them, it's gonna be a challenge when we do our next refresh, I think, just because we're planning for that. We haven't done it, right? And so being able to incorporate those group tags right off the bat is going to be a challenge. We're going to have to go through and I'm assuming we can do some sort of script that will change the group tags for serial numbers, some sort of PowerShell script, right? I'm sure that exists.
Yeah.
And so we'll have to kind of break it down from that perspective, but we don't really know what devices are going to what site until we get them in hand. So lots of things to think about when moving there, but definitely I think we can get past the whole asset tag and move to serial number. And even because we've always barcoded our devices with asset tag and not serial number, and maybe that's something that we change, right? We change it to that serial number so it's easier to see. So just processes that have to change. I think that's probably the hardest thing to combine.
Thanks, Laura. I like your comment about mind shift and shifting kind of how you're thinking about it. Raymond, can you come off mute?
Yes, just my 2 cents here. So the way I have it leveraged, we're a large school district, 1,000 sites. So we do also have a lot of sites that want to manage their own devices. So the way I've structured my naming convention is every site has its 4-digit location code. So I try to as much as possible, if a school has a set of 50 devices, it will start with a 4-digit location code, and then within that infrastructure, whether it's employees, students, or shared use, then I add 2 extra characters: E for employees, W for students, S for shared, and so forth. So one, anything I can sign, the group tags mirror that first 6 characters. So that way, whatever I assign to those, devices, they get it as well. And what the benefit of that is, when I do a mass export of my devices, I can then be able to easily identify where these devices are, similar to the last 2 comments, right? So at the end, it's a balance between managing the device and producing data from Intune to easily identify, the location of these devices. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Raymond. Lots of comments in the chat too. Before I say anything, Scott or Richard, do y'all want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think device name has been kind of a sore subject here for a while, with the move to both Intune and Autopilot. They're just managing devices this way as opposed to how things were done with MDT or ConfigMgr or just on-prem management. It's another thing that we've tried to get better support for different device name strategies. One of the big challenges that we have is it's really how Intune and Azure Active Directory are separate in terms of their device objects. Like both of them have their own device objects. But when you query something and create a group, you're actually creating that based off of the Azure Active Directory information on that device object. And we don't have a lot of device parameters or attributes that you can query against in order to like automate naming. Because that's what a lot of people used to do, is they would automate naming based on a variety of things that are in the operating system. So like the asset tag. You could query something in WMI, like from Win32 BIOS, you might have an asset tag field that you just grab from that because your OEM or partner or someone might actually put the asset tag physically on the hardware. And so you could easily query it and then create a device name based off that. Well, those attributes don't exist on the Azure AD objects. And so when it comes time to automate device naming, it's very difficult to do that because you really only have the device names or the device name itself that you can actually query off of for grouping and things of that sort. We have added extended attributes, though, to device objects. So you can add additional information to the device object. But if you're using Autopilot, we also give you that capability with group tags, like was mentioned earlier. So when we create that device object in Autopilot and create that group tag, we now have given you something that you can query against. And that group tag field in Autopilot is just a string. So you could put a number of different things in that string. It doesn't have to be one word. It could be a word and then a semicolon and then another word and another semicolon. And you could string together a bunch of different things. I don't know what the field length is. So if you're about to ask that question, I have no clue. But you can create dynamic groups based off of that group tag value. And if there's something in that field that you want to, get, sort of, creative with, then you can do that. And then you can use like contains or match or any of those parameters when you're creating the dynamic group. You can say, hey, if the middle of this string says, site code, 1, 2, 3, 4, then group it this way. So you can be creative with that group tag value. And it doesn't really require you to create any real customized or scriptable solutions. So you might want to think about doing that too if you haven't thought about that already.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing about group tags. That tends to be what I lead with when having these conversations. I think it gives you the best organization possible to build out those dynamic groups. But I think Bridget already said it, right? I think we hear this quite often, and these conversations come up, especially when we're doing new device deployments and things like that. It's always a challenge, and we tend to have to get everyone on board, right? Because I think there's the business processes that you base off of those names, right? Whether it's with your CRM or with a ticketing solution like ServiceNow, right? All of those things have to change, and then getting everyone back on board. So to Laura's point, getting everyone on board, I think half the time it's more of a mind shift battle, and changing those business processes, but everyone kind of has to commit to it. Awesome. So we are way over time. Thank you to everyone for participating today. I personally loved the engagement and the chat going on today. Y'all were great. I would love to see more of this, and it sounds like y'all would too. So if y'all have questions that you want to see how other people are using Intune, specific questions that you want to hear how people are handling app deployment, or hearing how folks are using hardware inventory, software inventory, just basic concepts like that, let us know so that we can schedule those calls, and you all can share best practices with each other, but that's what this is for. So, so thank you all. Keep the chats going. You can either use the meeting chat or use the community's questions channel on the team. If you're not a part of the team, make sure you register at aka.ms/EDU Endpoint office hours. Get added to the team so that y'all can continue the conversation. And we will see you all in 2 weeks.
Yep. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.